Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 458 of the MTGGoldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have a small crew here this week. Krim couldn't make it this morning, but we have with us the owner of MTGGoldfish, Richard. How are you this fine Monday, Richard?
Good morning, Seth. I'm recovering from a weekend of grinding Baldur's Gate. So
wait, have you still been playing Baldur's Gate? Have you come around? Okay, so all right, I guess I'm just gonna pitch the Patreon right now. We have a Patreon now, patreon.com/mtggoldfish. Or one of our first videos was the crew playing some Baldur's Gate. I know your initial reaction was like, this is really confusing. Like, has it gotten more fun now that you've kept playing it?
It's very fun, but it is extremely, extremely difficult. I think at some point my in-game time was 10 hours, but my Steam time was like 23 hours, meaning that's like 13 hours of like deaths and reset. And like every fight, I'm like, this is impossible. There's no tutorial. Even after reading guides, I'm like dying left and right. You need to know what you're doing for this game. So it's kind of interesting. I think I have figured it out at this point, but it is a very difficult game. It's typical WotC. There's like no tutorial. It's like being dumped into like a standard PTQ as like your first experience. And you're like, I don't even know how to untap and cast spells. Like, what is going on? So, but it's a very fun game.
Do you think you're going to try to play it all the way through then? Is that part of your goal?
Or? No, I've already committed like 30 hours.
So you're in. I
gotta finish. I'm totally in at this point. I will say, I looked at Commander Legends, the Baldur's Gate set, and I was so disappointed in it. I was like, I want a Shadowheart card. Shadowheart's my wife who have been working so hard with her. And I'm like, this card is trash. The art is trash. There's no special treatment. I'm like, what is this? I was so ready to fork over for some shiny card. And I'm like, ugh.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed in the set.
Yeah, it does kind of seem like a miss considering how much the game blew up that they didn't like have it tied together. Where I'd heard that they wanted to have it released at the same time or something, but it got messed up. So maybe they were trying to do that, but still, like, they could have some special versions and so forth. Yeah, I think that is a bit of a miss because maybe that would draw some like Baldur's Gate players into Magic, which would be kind of interesting. But anyway, if you wanna see. If you want to see me try to play Baldur's Gate, which is a real adventure, you can check that out on the Patreon, patreon.com/mtggoldfish. But we're here today to talk about Magic, and our big topic is we're going to talk about the best cards from Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So we've talked a bit about spoilers, but today we're talking about what we think are the best standard cards and the best non-standard, non-commander cards. So it's kind of like modern and historic and all those formats. Our best cards for those formats from the set. So we have some really interesting stuff to talk about. But before we jump into it, a reminder that today's show is brought to you by Card Conduit. And Card Conduit's the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. If you ever get tired of the hassles of buy listing, Card Conduit lets you skip them. You can use their curated service to send in as many cards as you want with a buy list value of $1 or more and pay just a 5% fee, or you can do a little bit of work with their sorted service and list and sort your cards in advance and pay just a 2% fee. Either way, you're going to get a detailed report with your results and a fast payment once your order is processed, and you can even get another 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/mtggoldfish. Card Conduit, they're the easiest way to sell your Magic cards, so thank you to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And let's talk some Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So let's start with Standard. So we're getting this new set for Standard. We talked last week about how we thought the set was actually pretty powerful, one of the more powerful sets in Standard. Today we're going to dig into our best cards for Standard. I think we have 7 that I'm actually super hyped for, that we're hyped for. Richard, why don't you start guiding us through our list here?
All right, so we got 7 standard cards, 7 non-standard cards. These are all non-commander cards. You can check out the Commander podcast where we talk about Commander. And then if we have time, we'll throw in some random commons and uncommons. Okay, hitting things off for standard. Bitter Triumph, 1 and a black, instant. As an additional cost to cast a spell, discard a card or pay 3 life. Destroy target creature or planeswalker.
Ooh. This set has some absurd removal. Like, you got this card, there's a white card we'll talk about in a minute, there's a Rakdos card that'll show up in our non-standard list. The removal in this set is like kind of off the chart. So Richard, What do you think about this? So, 2 mana instant speed, creature or planeswalker, that's about as efficient as we've ever seen this effect be. How big of a drawback is discarding a card or paying 3 life? Like, right now in Standard, the go-to is what? Go for the Throat. That's kind of the premier 2 mana black removal spell. Do you think this just straight up replaces it? Is it a mixture of the two? What do you make of this card?
It's almost stone unplayable, Seth.
Oh, really?
Okay, so normally this is pretty good, but we got pretty good removal in Standard. So I think you got to lean on that Planeswalker clause. 3 life or a card is a big deal. Like, that's not free. We already have Go for the Throat, which is non-artifact. So unless we have the artifact creature meta going on, like you're just gonna stick with that cut down. Total toughness and power 5 or less. And of course, everyone's favorite Leyline Binding is still a house in the domain decks. So we have pretty good removal. So I don't even know that this is going to slot into many decks. Like, if artifact decks rise, if planeswalkers are plentiful, you can see this. But can you imagine snapping this off on Graveyard Trespasser? Like, chuck 2 cards, play like 2 mana. Like, this is like atrocious, right? Like, 3 mana counts a lot when you're getting ping, or 3 life counts when you're getting pinged down by Sheoldred. So role player card, I can see it being played, but we have staple removal, which is Go for the Throat.
Oh, okay. So counterpoint here. We see in Modern, Bone Shards actually show up in several different decks. Bone Shards is 1 mana. It's an additional cost to cast it. You gotta sack a creature, discard a card, destroy target creature, planeswalker at sorcery speed. And that sees play because in some decks, discarding is actually an upside rather than a drawback. You're getting your animation target in the graveyard. You're discarding something with madness that then you can cast. We have a lot of graveyard mechanics in Standard. We have this descend stuff that cares about permanence going into the graveyard. We have reanimation. We got recursive threats like Tenacious Underdog. I think there's actually enough ways that you can build your deck with really playable cards that discarding might actually be an upside rather than a downside, that I think this card might actually just be better than Go for the Throat. So I actually think there's at least a home for this card in Standard. We'll see. We'll see where it shakes up, but I actually have high hopes for this.
We have the Saga. We have the Virtue that reanimates. Yeah. The problem is everyone's ready for this, and you want to dump your card at instant speed right before you reanimate. Whereas you want to kind of fire off your removal like ASAP. So the timing is awkward because everyone's packing Graveyard Hate. You don't want to dump your bomb too early. So yeah, I mean, Graveyard reanimation shenanigans, I can see a home for that.
If you want a downside case, it's that I was pretty hyped for Infernal Grasp when it came out, which was just 2 mana instant speed, destroy creature, you lose 2 life. And that hasn't really seen much play. So you're getting the upside of hitting planeswalkers here, which is nice. But it seems like players have decided that they would rather have the downside of Go for the Throat of not hitting artifacts than pay 2 life and be able to kill artifacts. So I guess that's the downside case. But I still think there's enough graveyard mechanics that this card could make some waves in Standard.
All right. Next, we got a reprint. We got Cavern of Souls. So choose a creature type when it ETBs, or when you play it, and then you can add a colored mana for that creature type that is uncounterable when you cast it.
So Richard, how big of an impact do you think this makes? This is known as one of the strongest cards, strongest lands back in Legacy and Modern. Obviously, if you're playing Soldiers or Furies or a deck that's built around all creatures of a type, the card's going to be really good in that scenario, or Dinosaurs now, thanks to Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Do you think people will play this outside of those scenarios, though? Is there any, like, I just really want to resolve my Atraxa in my, like, 4-color, 5-color pile, so I'm going to play this just to make sure that you can't make disappear my Atraxa or a Tally or something. Like, what do you expect from this one in Standard?
I think that's how we play it.
Yeah.
Usually, counterspells are not good against Soldiers, so you would be taking them out. So, like, Soldiers is not living in fear of getting counterspelled, but Esper,
it is
trying to resolve their Sheoldred. Yeah, yeah, it's a dual land. It doesn't cast it. Do they play any non-soldiers like spells? It doesn't help you with your spell casting.
Yeah, Wedding Announcement, I guess, sometimes shows up in Soldiers, like sometimes to make disappears of their own, but I think there might be like enough Soldiers in the deck that you could play it even if you didn't really care about the uncounterability, just like, it's an untapped dual land in my deck. I'm
They
really
play it.
scared of the Atraxa thing. That's what frightens me. Like, the reason Standard hasn't been dominated by Italian Atraxa is because Make Disappear and Disdainful Stroke out of the sideboard. Now that those cards are going to be uncounterable, I feel like the value of those cards goes way, way up. And the cost of it, playing a colorless land essentially, I think is well worth it in a deck that just really wants to, like, if I resolve my Atraxa, I win the game. If I resolve my Italia, I win the game. Getting around those counter spells is such a huge deal in those decks.
Yeah, I don't even care about that. I'm like, resolve my Shouldred, resolve my Rapine.
Yeah, I
Like,
guess that's also
like,
true.
like it control's already been pushed out. Remember, there was a period of time where control was running it, and it's already been pushed out with kind of this Esper mid-range stuff. That, you know, basically a mid-range deck that plays some counter spells will run over control. So this just gives you another tool. I don't think it'll be that important. I think it'll just be a role player in the set. Like, you know, we were living in Nephalia Drown Yard Control Standard or something. Like, this is your golden ticket out. But if people just playing a couple of Make Disappears here or there, it won't be too big of a deal.
So we didn't put this on our non-standard list because it's already legal in Modern, but I did want to mention quickly, first time coming to like Historic and to Pioneer, probably going to have a role there. There's like Spirits and Merfolk that see play in those formats. So keep it in mind for those formats too.
All right.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying these card names, not me.
Kutzil's Flanker, 2 and a white. It's a Cat Warrior 3/1 flash. When it ETBs, choose one. Put a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature that left the battlefield under your control this turn. You gain 2 life and scry 2. Exile target player's graveyard.
This seems like a Richard card. You like those value-y white creatures, Richard. What do you make of this one?
What do you do with it? I don't know what you do with it. If this was a 2-mana 3/1, we'd be cooking. But it's a 3-mana 3/1. It's totally understated.
Okay,
You flash it in for graveyard hate.
So
what do you do with this?
So you get the graveyard hate, which is actually makes me sad because there's the descent mechanic in my Urborg Lure Glyphs. Like, I really want this deck to work, and I feel like this is just like gonna really, worst case, you play it in the sideboard and it just wrecks the decks that are trying to fill their graveyard for descent. Like, absolutely wrecks them. Also hits Reanimator and stuff. The more interesting part of this card to me is in the aggro decks that could play this. Its first ability, the +1/+1 counter for each creature that left the battlefield under your control this turn, that actually works against Sunfall in Farewell. In the past, when we've seen this effect, it's always worded as for each creature that died this turn. The fact that this has left the battlefield, you build your big board of like random white creatures and you're attacking with your Adolines and stuff, and then your opponent Sunfalls, you can just flash this in and it's probably going to be a 8-power creature, 7-power, like pretty big based on all your stuff that got wrathed away, and hopefully close out the game after the Farewell or Sunfall. I think that's like one of the biggest upsides of this card is like punish that opponent for tapping out for those super powerful but expensive exile wraths. No?
So if this was 2-mana, it can be reanimated with Eigenjo. Why don't you just play Make Disappear if this is what you try to do? Like that, the fact that it's a 3-mana 3/1 is so bad if you're not getting Wrath. So if you're planning on getting Wrath, you have to overcommit into the Wrath and then hold up mana to make this come down, and hopefully you have enough to chip through. I feel like I would just play a counterspell if I was doing that. Is there I guess mono white aggro? So soldiers can play counterspells, but mono white aggro cannot. But I don't know. Is there a mana tide or something we could be playing? This seems very situational. You have to cut good cards for this. Are you willing to cut Extraction Specialist, Wedding Ring, Adolines? Like, what are we cutting to put this in the deck?
So maybe it's a sideboard all-star. So the card that it compares to the most for me is actually Tranquil Frillback, which is a green card, but it's also a 3-drop, and that's the one when it ETBs, it kind of has like weird multi-kicker where you can pay 1 to exile a graveyard, gain 4, blow up artifact or enchantment. That card doesn't see a lot of main deck play, but it does show up a lot in sideboards because of its flexibility. I think that might be the role for this card if you're playing soldiers or white aggro or even some of the Esper decks. This is one card that like is pretty good against sweepers, is really good against graveyard decks, and then the Scry 2 in Game 2 mode That's almost like drawing a card, right, Richard? Doesn't Scry 2 add up to drawing a card?
It's very good against aggro because you flash it in, it's removal. You can block, you scry 2, and you gain 2 life. That's assuming you can block and they're not hitting you with flyers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can see this. I can see this being played somewhere, but we got to figure out the home for it. But it's certainly unexciting. It's a 3-mana 3/1. That's a sideboard option.
There's so much graveyard hate in standard now, but now let's
But
move
you
on.
need
to the
it.
next
You
one.
need it. It's white
We
graveyard
do.
hate too. All right. Creature lands. We have a full cycle of creature lands. So these are allied colors. So Azorius, Selesnya, etc. I'll go over what each of them do. So the Azorius one is, so they all need to be tapped. They all add colors of the two things. And then 3 mana, the Azorius one becomes a 2/3 white and blue bird with flying. When it attacks, create a map token. The Selesnya one is 4 mana 3/3. It's a llama. When it attacks other creatures you control, get +1/+1 until end of turn. Dimir 4/4 blue black shark. Mill 4 players on attack, or mill 4 cards on attack. Gruul is 4 mana 3/4 dinosaur. When it attacks, another target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Untap that creature. Rakdos is 3 mana 2/3 menace insect. When it attacks, you discard a card, or you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So these are all very aggressively costed activations, and they decent bodies with some extra value, and their ability varies depending on which one it is.
I mean, they all seem pretty decent, right? Like, so we just got half a cycle in Wilds of Eldraine. All of the ones from Wilds of Eldraine have seen some amount of standard play. A lot of it depends on what colors are most popular. I think the Orzhov one probably sees the most play because there's so many Esper decks running around and it just fits in a lot of those archetypes. I don't see any reason why these wouldn't show up in pretty much many decks that are playing their colors, right? As long as you're slow enough that you can afford a couple tap lands, having lands that turn into creatures, I think is especially good in this standard because we go back to that Sunfall Farewell thing where like having something left over after your board inevitably gets swept to like pressure your opponent is really, really valuable. So which one of these would you say is best, Richard? I think they'll all see play. Like if you're in their colors, you play a couple copies. Is there anyone that sticks out as being like the S tier one out of this cycle?
So the best one is whatever the most meta colors are currently. But if you just ignore colors, probably the bird, probably the Azorius one.
2/3 flyer in a map for just 3 to activate is actually pretty nice.
I mean, so the biggest power one after a rat would be Dimir.
Yep.
So the Gruul one technically adds 5 power, but you need another creature. So if you're going after the Sunfall meta, maybe Dimir. But what is the most pop? I mean, so if you have a black mana symbol in your colors, you're probably seeing played here. So that'd be Rakdos and Dimir because we're in a black base standard. So maybe those two would be the best ones.
Yeah, I also like the self-mill aspect of the Dimir one too, which Urborg it's gonna happen, Richard. It's happening.
We're doing it. We're descending. Up this self-mill aspect. Okay, Kite Sail Larcenous. Blue, 3 mana 2/3 human pirate, flying ward 1. When it ETBs for each creature, choose up to one other target creature or artifact that player controls. For as long as this remains on the battlefield, the chosen permanent becomes a treasure artifact with tap. Sacrifice the artifact, add 1 mana of any color. You lose all other abilities.
Ooh. So this is, I mean, this is like a blue Banisher Priest effect. We see tons of white versions of this card. Fiend Hunter, Banisher Priest, Brutal Cathar, like there's a million of them. This color shifts that effect to blue. Is this like temporary removal spell? Yes, it has to stick around. It also gets flying. It also gets a little bit of protection in Ward 1, which is actually kind of relevant. We've seen on Rafine, like having to spend an extra mana really throws off the tempo to kill something like Rafine. This has that same protection. I feel like this is a very strong tempo card. It gets in the air, chips in for damage, deals with something, albeit temporarily, and then annoys your opponent when they have to actually kill it. This is really good, right? This is like a really good Banisher Priest.
I think it's really good, but I'm scared of giving people a random treasure. So if you are trying to tempo someone out, this is, I don't like.
Still, if it's
they play a 2-drop. You play your 3-drop to banish a priest. They're like, whatever, bro. And then they slam down a Shieldred.
Yeah,
How
but
bad could this backfire? This is like, is this Path to Exile? You know, you're
I
like,
mean,
oh, I can remove anything for 1 mana, but I've just ramped you and I'm kind of scared now. Or is this actually very good?
so
Like
I,
if they sack their Shieldred for a treasure, I think you're very happy about this. But if they have like say a 2/2 Dirtle creature you're trying to just remove for value, then I think you don't want to be ramping them. And you can
I
choose, by
would
the way. You can choose not to banish or freeze them.
Yeah, I guess it's still a 2/3 flying ward 1, even if you choose not to. I think I mostly agree with that. It's not that exciting against most 2-drops. Maybe there's some like against soldiers or some of the decks. What are they going to ramp into anyway? Like get their Harbin or whatever. That's fine. Their Bunny Corn. So when against the aggro decks, it's probably fine. Against the mid range decks, I think you really want to be hitting 3+ drops. So maybe it's like awkward on the curve a little bit that you don't want to run this out and like, oh, I hit your Tenacious Underdog, I ramp you, you blitz it anyway. Like that doesn't do anything. That's like a very, very useless. But against like Shieldred or any of the bigger threats, I think it's totally worth it. Like turning your Shieldred into a treasure, sure, maybe that lets you like cast multiple things the next turn or whatever, but you still got rid of the Shieldred. And then if your opponent does sack it, the downside of them just cut downing your Larsonist goes away. Like once they actually spend the treasure, then this is just hard removal.
Yeah, I think this card is very good. You could also target yourself. You can ramp yourself too, because it's each player.
Mono blue ramp. We're doing it.
Yeah, like you have something that's locked down or some token or something. You can ramp yourself too. So I actually, this card seems very good. Just gotta be careful not to burn yourself. Keep playing it.
Yeah.
Bone Horde Dracosaur, 5 mana, 5/5 in red. It's a dinosaur dragon. Flying first strike. At the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. If you exiled a land card this way, create a 3/1 red dinosaur creature token. If you exiled a non-land card this way, create a treasure token.
Okay, so I need to know what you think, Richard. A year ago, if I had seen this card, I would have said, no ETB, whatever. Like, it's just going to die to Doomblade. But we've just lived through a standard where Shieldred, a creature that dies to Doomblade, has been the dominant force in the format. If this sticks around for 1 turn, you draw 2 cards, probably get a dinosaur token and a treasure. Is this card actually good now? Shieldred has made me think that cards like this can be good, because if you just play enough powerful threats, sooner or later your opponent can't answer them all. And if this is the one that sticks, even for like 2 turns, it probably wins you the game with the value it generates.
I've learned from Shieldred. This is good. This is good.
It's gotta be.
And it also metas Shieldred. Like you don't draw the card, right? You can dig your deck to remove the Shieldred with the dragon. It's a 5/5 flying first striker. So it kills Shieldred in combat as well.
Yep.
It's flying. It has first strike. It can block. If you untap with this, you are getting at least 2 more creatures. Or 2 cards, right? You may play them this turn. Oh, no, so so the lands become creatures. So this has to be good.
It's gotta be. Like every turn it sits out, you're drawing 2.
But it dies to Doomblade, Seth.
It does die to Doomblade, but so does Shieldred, or go for the
Totoro. And that's where I was so wrong on Shieldred. I'm like, it dies to Doomblade, but
yeah, me too.
Okay, here's the counterpoint. So we have answers in our deck, but we have to dig for them. Shieldred prevents you from digging for your answers, because as you try to dig, Shieldred is like murdering you. This one doesn't do that. So you can dig to your heart's content. So maybe it still dies to Doomblade.
Imagine, like, don't you just like play Rakdos and like curve Shieldred into this? How do you beat that? Like, how do you kill everything you need to kill if you just play enough powerful things in a row? Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, plus it's got
this has to be like
types.
if you untap with this, how do you lose? This is more powerful than untapping with the Shieldred, no?
I would say so. You get 2 cards and a token.
It also is like a
mana.
finisher.
It flies. You can hit people with it.
And like we have ramp for dinosaurs. We have the like dinosaur Birds of Paradise thing. So that's something that's relevant. Also, we have dragon support. There's like Sarkin and Rivaz. So there's a bunch of like ways its creature type matters too, outside of just playing as a generic like mid-range threat. But I think this card's bonkers. Like this card's so good. Red got
Yeah,
some
okay.
bombs in this
We
set.
can't be burned by this. It's gonna release 0%.
I know. We're gonna have the podcast in a year. No one ever played Bonehorn at Doomblade, and we're
This
gonna
has to be. This is so good. This is so good. Okay. How about another dinosaur? Trumpeting Carnosaur. 6 mana, 7/6. Trample. When it ETBs, discover 5. 3 mana. Discard Trumpeting Carnosaur. It deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker.
Isn't this card kind of a joke? Like, this card's ridiculous. So it's
Like, it's good or it's bad? I don't know what you're saying,
like,
Seth.
I think it's got to be like busted. Like, it's like Carnage Tyrant stats. It has a really strong ETB. And then if it gets stuck in your hand, you can pitch it as like a 3 mana Strangle in the early game. So you're not going to have this like stuck in your hand if you're short on mana. This feels like built for Constructed. This does not die to Doomblade because you discover 5, so you're like getting something else that goes along with it. It can work as removal, and it's got a 7/6 trampling body.
Is 3 mana enough to 3 damage enough to kill anything?
Sort of. It doesn't kill Shieldred, unfortunately.
It doesn't hit
does,
Shieldred.
It doesn't
hit
kill
the dinosaur we were just talking about.
That's
it's more
true,
for like the aggro beatdown, right?
It gets rid of like Lord
off.
Skitter, which is big. It gets rid of Fairy Mastermind. It gets rid of a lot of the like early game aggro style threats. Not as good against the mid range. It gets Graveyard Trespasser. You do got to pay the ward or whatever, but so it's a decent amount of the early game stuff.
Would you reanimate this?
You could reanimate it. You can pitch it and reanimate it. The Discover works with Blink since it's an ETB trigger. Plus, like, Wizards has said that out of all the creature types on Ixalan, Dinosaurs is the one that they actually tried to make into a deck. They didn't try to make Merfolk a deck. They didn't try to make any of the other tribes. This one, they actually tried to make to a deck. So I think that this is like one of the best dinosaurs for the Dinosaur deck, which Wizards apparently tried to make a thing.
So 6
Do you not
mana
like it?
is a lot. I don't know, because it's 6 mana. Would you just not play the other one? Would you not play Bonehorn Dracosaur instead?
This cascades into Dracosaur, which then draws you into Shieldred, and then you can't lose.
So, like, do you need to extend your curve to 6 mana? Like, the question is, like, can you just stop at 4 mana, call Shieldred your bomb, and call it a day? The Carnosaur is interesting because it's 3 mana bad removal. But, like, is that even worth it? Like, what if you just ignore that and end your curve at 4 or 5 with the other one? So that is the question I'm asking, whether it's worth adding the additional lands and support to get this. Like, if 95% of the time you're playing this as 3 mana removal, that is horrendous, right? Like, you need to actually be casting this. And we have such powerful 4 and 5 drops. Maybe you just end your curve early and you don't bother trying to get
so
there.
Maybe it's just
that
too
would be my
expensive.
thought. But I don't know.
Interesting.
I'm imagine
high
playing
on it.
this and you discover into Shieldred or Bonehorn Dracosaur. Like, the game is over.
Oh yeah,
But you can
That's like a
also
tabby.
die because you're playing 3 mana removal and you're getting Soldier down, and then that is the end of it.
So I think of the 3 mana removal mode as like the upside. Like, I think if you're playing this, you're playing a deck that has a plan to actually cast it. You're ramping into it. You're playing Dinosaurs with their mana dorks. You're playing the new, like, whatever rampant growth effect that gets a basic forest. Like, you're playing stuff to ramp into this, so you're going to reasonably be casting it. And then that 3 mana mode is the fail safe. It's the like, oh, I got this really clunky, expensive hand. Well, I'm not doing anything. I can use this to help stay alive while I'm waiting to ramp into my other big things. I think this card's gonna be really good in Standard.
It's awkward. So if you ramp, the problem is you may discover into more ramp, being like utterly useless. If you reanimate, you can also reanimate this. You might also discover into reanimation belt, which you have no targets. So a little awkward. But maybe it's
Cruelty
fine.
of Gix. Cruelty of Gix gets around that because that's like reanimation that you can still get value out of. So maybe you got to build around it a little bit.
But if I was to go through the hoops of reanimating, why don't I just play like a Traxa or something? So this is an interesting card. This is an interesting card. I can see it being played. I can also see it not being played whatsoever because we have better alternatives. But
so Richard, I made this list. What card would you pick as the number 1 card out of our Standard cards? Because for me, I'm on record as Carnosaur being my number 1, but I'm curious what your number 1 is.
I choose Dracosaur.
That is also
I can see this being as red Shieldred, but like you get more cards from your deck. So I go Dracosaur. I think I would play Dracosaur as my curve topper rather than Carnosaur.
Plus, Dracosaur is good in Prosper, so you got that too.
Yes, it is.
All right, let's
Okay.
talk about some non-standard cards. What do we? And this is a mixture of formats. I think it's mostly focused on formats I play, so like Modern, Pioneer, Historic, but a mixture of those formats. I'll tell you which format as we go along. Richard, let's get into our list.
There's a lot of text here, Seth. Thousand Moon Smithy, 4-mana legendary artifact. When it ETBs, create a white gnome soldier artifact creature with this creature's power and toughness are equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures you control. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, you may tap 5 untapped artifacts and or creatures you control. If you do, transform it. The backside is a land. It taps to add white mana. Whenever you cast an artifact or creature spell using mana produced by Barracks of the Thousand, create a white gnome soldier artifact creature token with this creature's power toughness equal to the number of artifacts and or creatures you control. So it makes like constructs that are upgraded that also pump with your number of creatures. If you have 5 untapped artifacts or creatures, it transforms at the beginning of your main phase. And then as you use this land for mana, it makes new construct things for fun. So, what's the home for this?
That is the question. So there's affinity style decks, there's Urza style decks, there's Thopter Sword style decks. So there are decks that are built around artifacts. You could also go a very different direction and play it in like the Boros Convoke style deck. Maybe it's just too expensive at 4 mana for a deck like that. But the fact that it triggers off of creatures as well as artifacts, any sort of like go wide token deck, to me, it seems like the backside is just such a ridiculously huge payoff. And we've seen like Urza's Saga constructs or literal constructs be so good. They just get so big so fast. There's got to be a home for this, right? Or is it just is 4 mana just too much? Is it just like, Modern in 2023, 4 mana, like what a joke?
I think this is too cute. I think the constructs coming off of the Urza Saga, which is your land, is key. Paying 4 mana, waiting a turn, because it's your next pre-combat main phase, and then having 5 untapped artifacts that you need to then tap. So you're taking a turn off combat, or you have stuff to tap to do this. So like affinity would be the only thing I can think of that might actually, but like 4 mana, like you can't cheat this down. I think this is
4
too
mana.
cute.
4 mana is kind of a lot. It is kind of a lot. This is
what if you just play 4 Urza Sagas and just make constructs like off your lands and call it a day? Like, do we need to do this?
So it might be one of those cards that goes up in value more in like Pioneer / Historic, where you don't actually have Urza's Saga and you can jam it in some of the artifacts and index in those formats. So I think I might agree that maybe in Modern it's just a little too slow, or maybe it's like a one-of type card for affinity style decks or Urza style decks. I think in Pioneer Historic though, that's where I get even more excited about this, because the format's a little bit slower. And legitimately, if you flip this, every turn for free making a construct as you cast a creature artifact, that's going to take over the game, right? How does that not take over the game just with massive creatures? So I think that it's got a home. I don't know if it makes it a Modern, but I'm pretty high on it in Pioneer or in some of the arena formats.
Do we have any construct makers in Pioneer?
We have actual. What is the Karn? Remember the Karn that did that? The original name of the Karn construct. The 4 mana Karn. Yeah, I think that's the main one. Yeah.
No, we don't have like Urza or Urza Saga. We don't have the broken U cards. Okay. Souls of the Lost. 1 in a black. It's a spirit. As an additional cost to cast the spell, discard a card or sacrifice a permanent. Its power is equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that number +1.
All right, Richard. You're the Goyf master. Is this a Goyf that can be good in 2023? Like, is this better Goyf?
Which format are we talking about?
We're talking Modern. Probably let's focus on Modern for this one. I think this is going to be at its best in fetch land formats, where fetch lands are adding permanents to your graveyard to grow it. So I think this is mostly, I would say, a Modern card. So like, would you play this in Jund? No. You can pitch a land, get it back with Ren and 6, do those little cute Jund shenanigans. No.
You have to work. Okay, you have to work. Okay, you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get this to respectable damage range. 'Cause you have to work so hard to get
What
Like
about
if you just like fetch, it's still just a 3/4. like it didn't. The whole point of Tarmogoyf is like you fetch Thoughtseize and like it's a 4/5 and ready to go, and you're putting pressure, and even that is like stone unplayable. So this thing needs to go into a dedicated mill deck or something where you have only permanents, and it's like Boneyard Worm or something at this point. Like, are we really playing this? Remember, you can't even cast this for free. Like, you have to
that?
chuck a card on the way down or sack a permanent. So it's
What
stone
about
unplayable, right? Or it's
okay,
like a
okay.
combo piece or something.
What about
right?
like Hollow One or like Reanimator, like doing the bone shards, like trying to turn the downside of discarding something into an upside? Like this can be legitimately huge, right? If you're imagine Dredge. I don't know if this makes it in Dredge. Out of all these like big descend things, I think it's the card that's closest to making it in Dredge. But like in a deck like that, this is legitimately going to be a 2-mana 10/10 or something. I guess it still gets hit by Solitude or whatever, but it is a legitimately massive creature. It's one of those cards where like I haven't found the home for it yet, but I feel like this is modern playable power level. Am I off base on it? Is it not? It's just not strong enough, you know? Think.
No. Like,
Oh,
okay.
I feel like it's
We already
strong
have
enough,
2
but doesn't
mana
have a
8/8
home.
flyers. Okay, we have free constructs which are like infinite power. Let's say this is like a 2 mana 14/14 no evasion. Do we care about
So
this? It gets chumped for days. It still eats a leyline binding. If they solitude it, I guess you get like a second life to work with. But is that gonna help you win if you're playing more Souls of the Lost? Like, are you gonna get anywhere with this?
So am I just living in the past then? Is this a card that would have been good like 5 years ago in Modern? But is this just like it's a card that doesn't stand up to Modern Horizons 2 power level? Is that kind of the issue?
Like, isn't Murktide like just like a million times
Yeah.
better than this?
I mean, Murktide.
Can you imagine the
have
work
its
it
own
needs to get this to an
requirements.
8/8 or an 8/9? It doesn't even fly.
I
at that
don't know.
point, like,
You just Satyr Wayfinder and mill some stuff. Maybe I'm
you
living in
play
this.
Dredge without the payoff, then, right? Like, if your graveyard gets axed, you're done.
This
But
is
you
my
actually
payoff.
have no way of winning.
This and Goyf, jam them all together. Now we're going to town. All the Goyfs.
Oh,
All
nice.
right.
You can make sure
All
you get
right.
no wins whatsoever. What about like Pioneer? But
I
it's
actually-
usable in other formats.
So I actually feel like this goes down in value once you get to the no
You need
fetch land
fetches?
formats.
Okay.
On the other hand, there are like graveyard decks, like Abzan Greasefang is a good example that is pretty permanent heavy, very self-mill heavy. Could you play this? Yeah, I mean, this is like pitch your Parhelion on turn 2 from your hand to set up Greasefang the next turn. It's a backup plan where you're just like, they dealt with my whatever Greasefang, so I just play this big, 6/6 and go to town. So I could see there being homes for it in like Pioneer or Explorer. Whether or not it like, I don't know. Would you play this in like Golgari midrange in a format like Pioneer? I kind of doubt it, but maybe.
It seems like so much work for like so little payoff. Like if you just had a 2 mana 4/4 or 2 mana 5/5, is that even that play? Let's say it was 2 mana 5/5, chuck a card on the way down. Would you play that? Don't we have that already? Actually,
Yeah,
do we have
no.
a 4?
No, probably not, I guess. And you still have the weakness to the graveyard. I think decks like Greasefang work because the risk of getting blown up by graveyard hate is there, but the payoff is so high that if you dodge it, you just like win the game on turn 3. So it makes it worth it. This doesn't do that. This is like
You know
a
what it
big
needs?
creature, but what is it? Trample?
Okay, obviously trample, ward 8, fly,
Ward-
whatever, right? But if it was like number of permanents exiled,
Ooh, that's what we need.
then you
Exile
can make an
Goy.
argument for like Dredge or Greasefang or something playing this
Mm.
as some kind of weird backup. But
Yep.
even then, I feel like you wouldn't play this. Like,
it's
why go for the case you're being totally hosed? And is one creature really going to win the game for you at that point? But that would be another dimension you can attack on. But this goes with, along the same primary dimension, which is I need my graveyard intact. So if the graveyard goes, like this card is useless along with the rest of your deck.
It's soft to the same things your primary plan is soft to, which is something you usually want to avoid. So, all right.
All right, Volatile Fault. It's a cave land. Tap to add colorless. 1 tap, sacrifice to destroy target non-basic land an opponent controls. That player may sacrifice their library for a basic land, put in the battlefield, then shuffled. You create a treasure token.
Ooh, so how does this compare to Field of Ruin, Richard? So 1 mana cheaper to activate. Sometimes Field of Ruin can be like a little slow because it's 2 mana. The downside is you're only getting a treasure rather than actually getting another land out of your deck. So faster Field of Ruin, but it doesn't fully replace itself.
Is this not Ghost Quarter? What does Ghost Quarter actually say? This is
So
just
Ghost
1 mana
Quarter,
Ghost Quarter that makes a map, right?
you get a treasure, but yeah. It's like
Oh, yeah,
it's
yeah,
like so Ghost Quarter is free, but you get nothing. This is 1 mana and you get a treasure. Field of Ruin 2 mana, but you get a land back.
yeah.
I feel like
This is
if
playable
you're
though. Like, are we playing? I mean, I guess if we need the what's that mono white destruction deck where you tax with
yes,
the
Death and
lead and
Tax,
arbiter? Yeah, and
yes,
you
I
needed
think
another Ghost
that's
Quarter. Do we need more Ghost Quarters? I don't know what that deck looks like.
so I think that's actually the home I think that I had for this deck. So if you
Yeah.
look at the Death and Taxes decks, right now they usually play 4 Ghost Quarters, 4 Field of Ruins. I think this is just better Field of Ruin in that deck, because if you have Arbiter out, you're not searching for land anyway, so the treasure is actually kind of an upside because you're actually getting something out of it, and it's just cheaper to activate, which lets you actually put something on the battlefield and activate it when Field of Ruin is too much mana. I don't know if this will see play outside of that deck, but I think specifically in the Arbiter Taxes decks, I think this is going to be very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder how popular that deck is.
It's
But
not that popular. It's like tier
Can
3
we
at the
make it
moment
to
or
like
something.
36 Ghost Quarters? That's our deck. We just play nothing but Ghost Quarter type cards. Like, I think we're getting there.
It's also a cave. Not that that matters in older formats, but it might matter in somewhere someday.
All right. Tarian Soul Cleaver, 1 mana legendary artifact equipment. Equipped creature has vigilance. Whenever another artifact or creature is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on equipped creature. Equip 2.
I see you looking confused, Richard.
We combo Thopter Sword? Like, what are we doing with this exactly? Does Thopter Sword need another combo piece?
So I don't think Thopter Sword needs another combo piece. There are combos for this card. It's very similar to Blade of the Blood Chief, which is mostly a combo piece. But I don't know if any of the combos are relevant for formats like Modern. They're usually like kind of janky Commander, Ashnod's Altar, Phyrexian Altar shenanigans. The place I see this card being very good is actually in Urza Saga decks, specifically Urza Saga decks that are also Hardened Scales decks. Hardened Scales, I think this is a really, really solid, like, one of tutor target. You can get it with your Urza Saga. It works with the theme of your Arcbound Ravager sacrificing stuff, your Walking Ballista sacrificing stuff is another way to kind of like double up your counters, and they go on the Ozolith. So I think that's where I would play this card. Maybe someone can find like a janky combo that works with it, but to me, I see this as like really, really good one of Hardened Scales tutor target for Urza Saga.
Urza Saga fixes all.
Yeah, Urza's.
You don't want to fill your deck with these garbage cards, but one of tutor target? Bam.
yeah. Urza Saga solves all those problems. Oh, we got to talk about this next one, Richard. This is the card I want to hear your opinion on the most, because this is the most Richard card.
Echoing Deeps. You may have it's a land. You may have it enter the battlefield tapped as a copy of any land card in a graveyard, except it's a cave in addition to its other types.
Okay,
what?
So
wait. Tap, add call. You may have.
Okay, so
enter. So it actually is an ETB untapped land, and it can enter tapped to copy something.
Yes, it can come into play untapped like a waste, basically. An untapped land that makes colorless, or tapped as a copy of land from the graveyard. So, Richard, I know we're not talking about Commander here, but we got to talk a little bit about Commander here, because you're the one that put me on to Vesuvas and Thespian Stages. Those are like signature Richard cards that you play in pretty much every deck. Is this part of that package? Is this another like signature Richard plate in every deck? Or does the fact that the land need to be in the graveyard, does that kind of kill it for your purposes?
You've seen how bad my mana base is this season, Seth, because everything is a must-play colorless Richard land card. I want to play this. I think I'm going to put this in. Like, can my mana base support like a million colorless lands? I'm not sure, because the third copying, I think it has purposes, right? Like when your actual land you want to copy dies, you can copy it. Unfortunately, it doesn't work with things that flip like Dowsing Dagger,
Yeah,
but
that's the
like
drawback.
someone chucks their coffers or something, like cool coffers, bro. This is an ETB untap land too. Probably staple in any 2-color deck, 3-color decks maybe. At 4 or 5, it's getting risky as you run like unlimited things. I guess you
Yeah.
could have it. Okay, you could have it ETB tapped as a fetch land, and then
Mhm.
fetch up your stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of the floor, I think, is you copy a fetch land, it's tapped, which is
Get a
annoying, but then you
triome,
can
but it
you can
actually
get a
fixes.
triome.
This is it. This is every deck.
And then
Every deck.
you can also play it with your strip mines, like to get the lands that you want in the graveyard or to double up a strip mine. So yeah, I feel like this is a good commander card. I also think this has some ramifications in 60 card formats. So in modern, virtually all with Urza Saga, this like copies your Urza Saga from the graveyard to keep that value train going, and like loam style decks if you wanted. The other places is probably going to be really good. I think might be in Legacy in Dark Depth style decks. They're already loaming, and there's wastelands in that format. And one of the ways you try to beat the Dark Depths deck is wastelanding their Dark Depths and Thespian stages. This copies whatever of your combo piece ends up getting wastelanded, or that you mill off a loam or whatever to restart your combo. So I think it'll see play there. You could also see an argument for like Cloud Post decks in Legacy as a way to fight through wastelands. Like, yeah, so I think this card actually has some 60 card ramifications, along with being a very, very, very Richardy commander card.
Update my boomer knowledge of Legacy. Is Wasteland still play? Is that a thing for like a standard normal deck, not against a lands deck?
Wasteland is currently the most played land in Legacy.
Yeah, so we still delvering,
50% of decks
we still
almost.
playing stuff, and then we hit their underground sea.
Yep.
Like this just gives you 8 wastelands, right?
8
like
wastelands.
Renin 6 was banned because you could recur your wastelands and destroy everyone. So isn't this insanely
so
strong?
How many?
ETB's untapped if you need mana, right?
It does. I mean, how many can you play though in like a Delver shell? Is there like a limit on how many wastelands you can actually play? Like, are you gonna have too many colorless lands at some point if you just like go too
well,
deep?
So this thing can cop this. So you have perfect mana in Legacy because you have real dual lands. This can become a dual land, so it's an ETB tap land.
Yeah.
And then there's just random upside. Like, can you? What if you? Oh no, you can't do it. I was like, what if you turn 1 play this tapped and then turn 2 double wasteland them, but you can't. The wasteland has to be in the graveyard.
The wasteland's got to go to the graveyard first. Yeah. Now maybe it's even better than I thought. I was thinking it was for specific decks, but maybe you can just copy wastelands.
Okay, Seth, we're getting here. So we just got the Ghost Quarter as well.
Yeah.
So now we have Echoing Deeps.
Yes.
Are we we're doing the same thing in modern here?
We're doing. Yeah, I gotta have your Leon and Arbiter, but we're getting close. We're getting close.
Yeah. Okay. Molten Collapse, Ractal Sorcery, 2 mana, red and a black. Choose one. If you descended this turn, you may choose both instead. Destroy target creature card or destroy target creature or planeswalker. Destroy target non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less.
I mean, this has to be really good, right? It's like Dreadbore. I think we talked about this on last week's podcast. It's like Dreadbore, but you get the upgrade that like it randomly snipes other stuff, and all you gotta do to trigger descend is crack a fetch land. So I feel like this is enough an upside to make Dreadbore modern playable. And if you're playing other formats, then it's just a strict upgrade in like Pioneer to Dreadbore or whatever.
I'm insulted this is so low, Seth. The disrespect of Rakdos.
I mean, it also goes in the best
Dreadbore that picks off an amulet.
Yep.
An amulet of vigor.
Hardened Scale,
Hardened
Soul Guide Lantern. There's a pretty big list of things that it snipes.
It is really good. I mean, so it's a strict upgrade to Dreadbore, and then you have Revolt or whatever. So this is the problem is, will Rakdos actually play this? Do we care enough to play sorcery speed removal? Like, are there planeswalkers running amok? Are there 1 mana value spells? What is the Titan matchup look like?
So that was actually going to be my question. Like, Rakdos Scam is the #1 deck in Modern by quite a bit at the moment. Is this going to make it in that deck? If you look at the deck list, so it pitches to both Fury and Grief, which is nice. Yes. That's something you want. Do you cut Terminate for this? Is this better than Terminate? It's sorcery versus instant, but you get the upside. It gets Pithing Needle, it gets Grafdigger's Cage, a bunch of different like graveyard hate style sideboard cards, along with the main deck like Amulet in some matchups, Shadow Smear in some matchups, Hardened Scales in some matchups. Is that enough of an upside to just drop Terminate for this?
I think so.
I lean
I
towards
think
yes.
the magic is it pitches to Force of Will, the meme, right? Like if this card is truly horrendous, it doesn't matter because it's going to your evoke elementals. I think, not knowing anything about the matchup, but I would imagine Scam versus Titan is not in Scam's favor. So the ability to like main deck pick off those like if you pick off the amulets, that deck's like got nothing. So if you can pick off the amulets, that's really good. So I think this is alone worth it. So I would probably try running these, and again, it pitches to the other cards, right? Like you don't need to play this bad card if you don't want, right? You can get rid of it. So I think we're gonna see it.
I agree. I think it's enough of an upgrade that we're going to see. Obviously, like just replaces Dreadbore in other formats, but I think this is enough of a boost of power compared to Dreadbore that I do think we're going to see it show up in the Rakdos decks back in Modern, and maybe some other decks too. Like the mana fixing is so easy. Like you could play this in a lot of different archetypes because fetch lands are just so heavily played, and all it takes is a single one to deal with it. What about your favorite Jund, Richard? Would this make it in Jund? No, not.
I mean, okay. I mean, it would that do anything to fix Jund? So people play Dreadbore non-ironically, okay? Like it is like on the cusp when there are annoying planeswalkers. Like for example, if Ren and 6 was meta, like you're playing Dreadbore. So Dreadbore is very playable. This being a strict upgrade makes it very playable. Does this give any percentage win points to Jund? Probably not.
Not enough.
So effectively, it doesn't matter.
Okay, that's fair.
Tashana's Tidebinder, 3 mana 3/2 Merfolk Wizard with Flash, in blue. When it ETBs, counter up to 1 target activated ability or triggered ability. If an ability of an artifact, creature, or planeswalker is countered this way, that permanent loses all abilities for as long as Tashana's Tidebinder remains on the battlefield.
So this is my number 1 Modern card from the set. I think Molten Collapse is also very good, and the land's good. This card to me, I think, is kind of absurd. So if you think about this, you got good stats, you got Flash, so you already want this. What does this card actually do? Well, level 1, you Stone Rain a fetch land. Like you just hit the fetch land trigger, you know, it's 3 mana land destruction. But this also hits the One Ring and stops it forever for as long as it stays on the battlefield. You hit a One Ring activation. It can hit Fury, Solitude's ETB trigger to keep your stuff alive. It can shut down Ren or Teferi well, Teferi is a little tricky, I guess, because you can't flash this in, but like Ren forever. Shutting down planeswalkers forever on a good body. Like, is this not just like a ridiculously good creature for Modern? I feel like this is a card that can make Merfolk a deck again. I feel like Merfolk is going to change. I feel like Merfolk, its old school game plan of like, oh, I'm going to play all the lords and just like run out every Lord of Atlantis. That doesn't work in 2010 in a world of Furies and like evoke elementals. No, that's not going to work. But what if you're like more of a Merfolk tempo deck where you're playing this and like Merfolk Trickster, Sevulin, and playing like Merfolk kind of like tempo control, almost fairy style Merfolk. I feel like this card is so good in a shell like that. And you don't even have to be a Merfolk deck. Like, it's just like a really, really strong card. It shuts down so many things. Am I off base? Is this not as good as I think, Richard? I feel like this card's so good.
Is Stifle our answer here? Is so
Stifle
okay.
That One Ring.
I totally do not believe this is a card outside of Merfolk. I can't imagine anyone just jams this into their deck because like 3 mana 3/2. And like I get to stifle something. But in Merfolk itself, is this enough to fix Merfolk? And does this even make the cut in Merfolk? Because there's a lot of like good cards in Merfolk. Like, what are we? So if someone sandbags a Fury and tries to Fury to stabilize, then you get them. And they're probably dead.
Yeah.
Do we not have any stifle spells like at 2 mana or 1 mana in all of Modern?
I mean, you can play like Tail's End or something, like some sort of weird counter spell.
Is Trickbind legal? What is
Trickbind is, yeah, Trickbind's legal, but like this shuts down those things forever, though. Like the losing all the abilities. I think that's not only does it get rid of like the ability you stifled, the card has no text for as long as this sticks out. So this like is a permanent answer to a planeswalker, or the one, well, permanent in the sense as long as it's on the battlefield. But like once you stifle an ability, that card's just like locked down for as long as it sticks around. That's the part that I think is the big upgrade. Stifle can stop the One Ring for a turn. This stops the One Ring for as long as it's on the battlefield, which is a huge, huge difference.
Okay, realistically, who can play this? Like,
so Merfolk is the easy one.
Merfolk,
Like I think
obviously.
Merfolk realistically can play it.
Would Murktide play this? I don't think so. The
Murktide
body's
maybe.
essentially useless, no? A 3-mana 3/2 is essentially useless in Modern, no?
I mean, it does have flash, so you can do the Ambush Viper and like whatever, hit a Ragavan or a Bowmasters maybe if you can get the timing right. Coco decks are not much of a thing anymore.
Can you get hit by the monkey and then lock this down? Oh no, but they can just legend rule the monkey. It doesn't stop them from casting another monkey.
Yeah, it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop another one, and it also doesn't stop. So if your opponent scams like a Fury, it's not going to stop both triggers, which is awkward.
Wait,
so it doesn't line up as well. Well, like if you stop the Fury's ETB trigger and then it goes to the graveyard and then you just scam it back into play, the second
one,
I
see.
It'll be a new Fury, so that one will still resolve.
Can you stop a living end? No, wait. So
no.
you get the Cascade, is that a trigger?
Oh, yeah, you can stifle the Cascade trigger. That's true. You can't stop the living end itself, but you could stifle the Shardless Agent trigger or whatever to keep it from cascading. I wish it hit Beanstalk. I wish it didn't exclude enchantments. That would be the other trigger that I...
It excludes enchantments?
Okay, so you can still stifle the
Beanstalk
trigger, but it doesn't lock down Beanstalk forever. That would be the one upgrade. It hits Leyline Binding.
Beanstalk is the new One Ring. We don't even play the One Ring anymore.
I mean, it gets Leyline Binding. That's one of the most popular removal spells. Omnath trigger. It stops that. So Merfolk for sure. I think this is the card that gives me hope of Merfolk being good again. Beyond that, I don't know what the home is, but I think this card is like, I think it's so strong. It's so strong. It's so strong.
I don't think Merfolk is legit because of this. I don't think you can play Merfolk still, but maybe we're wrong. You still get Fury. So. Like there's still all those games you auto lose because you didn't have 3 mana up to cast this one card in exact response to Fury. And then you still lose. And even without the Fury, I'm not sure you have enough power to be beating people up in Modern with the Merfolk deck anymore. So
what about
Merfolk
just
is really strong against combo decks, right? But everyone's a mid-rangey, grindy deck in Modern now. So this doesn't really play to Merfolk's strengths.
What about some sort of Crim deck? You know how Crim just likes to like, I'm going to flash in my thing and like counter your thing and annoy you.
Shadow of Doubt if he wants to Stone Ring you. That draws the card.
Ooh, Shadow of Doubt into this. How about Mono Blue Land Destruction? That might be an against the odds that we win 0 games with.
You have a lead in Arbiter. Your Esper.
Yes. Well, those...
I don't know about Merfolk, but I would be shocked if I see it in other decks. Let's see if any of the blue decks, because there are a bunch of blue decks, right? Like Rhinos, Omnath, Murktide.
It is expensive enough to work with a Cascade, which I guess is an upside. You're not going to accidentally Cascade into it. This is a card that might have been better a few years ago. Remember when Collected Company was like a real card in Modern? For some reason, Collected Company is like not even good enough anymore.
Fury. Why are you playing things that die in a Fury?
But this stifles the Fury. I mean, and then also like Merfolk in other formats. I think get a boost of power. We've seen Merfolk a little bit in Historic. We haven't really seen them in Pioneer. Those formats though actually have just value Collected Company decks where I'm just gonna like play a bunch of good things that cost 3 mana or less and hit him with my Coco. So it could show up in a deck like that.
What if you just played Counterspell, Seth? you're listing things that Counterspell or Spell Pierce like take care of.
But it's a Merfolk, Richard. It's a 3/2. You're gonna beat him. Where's a Dowsing Dagger? I gotta put this into terms you understand. And where's a Dowsing Dagger?
I mean, it's gonna be a 4/3 with the Lord of Atlantis on the battlefield. You can't even Phantasmal Image it, right? It has to. Oh no, you
could
with Vial.
With Vial, yeah.
Okay, I'm a closeted Merfolk player, Seth. I used to play Merfolk in Legacy.
Really?
I played Merfolk in Modern. I love the fish. I'll give this a try. I'm curious if this makes it any more
Yes.
legit.
Yes.
I have a feeling no. I feel like
No.
I'm still gonna get overrun by the One Ring. Like, sure, that one time you can counter it, but all the other games where you don't have it, like here's the game: when you have Tidebinder and they don't have the One Ring, you're not winning that game. But when they have the One Ring and you don't have Tidebinder, they're winning the
Yeah.
game. Right?
Yeah.
So
No,
that's why I don't
that's
like the situational gotcha card. Same with the Fury, right? but I'll give it a try. We'll bust out Merfolk. I'm curious what it looks like in 2023. It's been a while.
Well, report back. I'll be curious. I wanna see how it goes. So I had Tishana's Tidebinder as my number one, Molten Collapse number two. What would your number one modern card be, Richard? Out of the cards we talked about,
I think Echoing Deeps. I don't know about
Ooh,
modern,
the
but I think
land.
Legacy. Like so Molten Collapse is niche enough that I don't think like no one's gonna care that Scam plays two of these. Like no one's gonna freak
Yeah.
out. But if Echoing Deeps takes off, like everyone's gonna be like, why did you make another insert broken land? Right? Why did you make something that works with dredge or something? I don't know, right? So I think Echoing
That's-
Deeps is my sleeper pick here.
Echoing Deeps might be the most exciting because a lot of the cards we talked about, it's like, oh, Tishana's Tidebinder could go into Merfolk, Molten Collapse, upgrade on Dreadbore. It's like upgrades to existing decks. Echoing Deeps is the closest to something that maybe could make like a new archetype or make like a tier 3 archetype, a tier 1 archetype. So I think in some ways it's the highest upside of all the cards. Like if something's actually going to shake up the format, I think Echoing Deeps is the card that's most likely to do that. When a lot of the other cards I think will see play, but they're just like, oh, now my Terminate's slightly better, my Dreadboard's slightly better, my Merfolk is slightly better. So I'm excited to see what people do with that one too.
All right. So those are, I think we hit up 7 standard cards and 7 non-standard cards for our top Lost Caverns cards.
I want to know what people think. I want to know, what did we miss? I made this list. What did I miss on this list? What are you hyped for in standard? What are you hyped for in other formats? This set is very, very strong. So I'm sure there's some other things that we didn't even talk about today that have a chance to show up in standard and other formats. So let us know in the comments if you're someplace where you can comment what cards you're hyped for from Lost Caverns of Ixalan for those formats. Richard, I don't think we're going to get to fish mail today, but one of these days we will. How do people send that in?
All right. You know what you should do? You should tell us all of your cards via fish mail at MTGGoldfish with the hashtag MTGFishmail, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of our podcast for today. So Richard, thanks for hanging out. Thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And check out the Patreon, patreon.com/MTGGoldfish. And we will be back next week to talk about whatever goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, have an amazing week, everyone. And this is a crew signing out.